Good afternoon, and welcome to our UpSkill Works Forum series, where we engage business and community leaders, policymakers, and leading thinkers on the key workforce issues our region and nation confront. I'm Peter Beard, and I lead the Greater Houston Partnership's UpSkill Houston initiative that partners with employers, educational leadership, and community-based organizations to strengthen the talent pipeline our region's employer need and to help Houstonians connect to the good careers that increase opportunity and prosperity. Before we get to our guest, I want to do several things. First, as we enter the flu season, I'd like to offer a couple quick reminders to help keep us safe. Second, I'll review a couple housekeeping details and acknowledge the underwriters and sponsors of the UpSkill Works Forum series. As we enter the flu season, we can do a lot to ensure we are safe for the holiday season. There are just 6 things we already know that can help Houston and all of our residents stay safe and healthy. First, get your flu shot. Second, wear your masks. Third, please social distance. Fourth, please avoid congregate settings. If you have to, fifth, gather outdoors. And as we always know, remember to wash your hands. And now for those housekeeping details. All attendees are muted and your videos turned off for the entirety of the webinar. Please do not use the chat function for Q&A. This will not be moderated for questions. The chat function should be used to connect with our production team if you're having any issues. If you have any questions for Matthew, you should use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. This area will be moderated and we'll be answering questions from that. I'd also like to acknowledge the sponsors of the 2020 UpSkill Works Forum series. The Greater Houston Partnership and UpSkill Houston would like to thank and say big appreciation to our gold level sponsors, Houston Community College, the Merrick family of companies, Texas Mutual Insurance, and Winstead PC. Our silver level sponsors include Accenture, AT&T, Centerpoint Energy, HCA Houston Healthcare, Lone Star College, San Jacinto College, and Western Governors University, Texas. I'd like to personally thank our sponsors for your support of UpSkill Houston's work, and I'd like to introduce today's session and our guest. Matthew Daniel is a principal consultant on the Employer Solutions team at Guild Education. His focus is on supporting Fortune 1000 companies as they think about how to figure out and how to upskill and reskill their talent for the way that work continues to evolve, especially in light of COVID. Guild uses credentialed learning to support companies with engaging and developing their workforces. Matthew has a very strong background in learning strategy, learning technology, and user experience design, and has worked with major companies including Nike, Cigna Healthcare, GlaxoSmithKline, Microsoft, General Motors, and Capital One. In today's session, we're going to explore how employers can invest in new ways to upskill and strengthen their talent. We will also learn about innovations in career coaching and support to strengthen learning outcomes. Welcome to Houston, Matthew, and thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks so much.
It's great. It's great to have you here.
Yeah.
So just as a reminder to our audience that we'll respond to questions that viewers submit via the Q&A function, and I'm going to be monitoring that chat as we go forward. And so as you have questions for Matthew, please feel free to submit them. Matthew, before we get started, I wanted to say that in our first conversation, you were highly passionate about this work. So I'm interested in why you were motivated by this work.
Yeah, on a super personal note, I am Arkansan is how I grew up. I grew up in rural Arkansas. I am a first generation college graduate. The oldest of 4. I have 3 siblings, none of which have graduated from college. None of the generations before me graduated from college. And my dad was my biological father worked on a coal-fired power plant, never had an opportunity to access education or other types of jobs. My mom was a coder who couldn't break into a for real software engineering job because she didn't have a degree. And so when you spend your time surrounded, and that's just a picture of my family, I come from a whole community of that. And when you spend your time looking around you and seeing the lack of access to opportunity for the people around you, it's disheartening. And as you mentioned, I've worked in learning and talent development for years. I've had the opportunity to work in organizations helping generally people who are educated get more access to education. And when the opportunity at Guild came along to help folks reskill and upskill, especially frontline employees, it was pretty darn exciting to think that we could have an impact on creating economic and talent mobility in communities. And so that's what moved it for me, was the idea that I could do the same thing that I was passionate about in my own family, but I could do it at scale, and to do it with a company like Guild, who is a B Corp. And so the motive is about the community good. And anyway, so that is what started this journey for me. And then, it's only a moment in time, Peter, before I get pretty wound up here again. It's kind of what I do.
I know.
So hopefully it'll connect with folks.
It was because of that conversation I wanted to kind of let people see that side of you. And so, welcome, and I'll let you kind of introduce us to Guild, and then we'll take some questions. We'll kind of break it up a little bit.
Yeah. All right. So, so for those folks, let me jump into. I have a very few number of slides. For all of you who are watching the news on the other screen or in the TV in your home, like, just shut it off for an hour. Just have a moment away from election headlines, and let's talk about what we can do for the good of our communities, for the good of our employees. So first, I work for Guild Education. I think you guys have had other folks from Guild around for other forums, so you may know a little bit about us, but I'll tell you what gets me really excited about the company. Ultimately, we are a three-way marketplace, and our focus is serving three different audiences. We serve our employer partners, organizations like Walmart, like Chipotle, Disney, others, who want to offer a benefit, education as a benefit for their employees. Secondly, we work with nonprofit universities who are looking for opportunity. And when we say nonprofit universities, the majority of folks that we have in our marketplace are really focused on adult learners, working adult learners that have different needs and expectations than maybe some of your more standard universities. And then finally, of course, that three-way marketplace has the working adults who are looking to upskill and reskill. And Guild as an organization, when we go into companies like Walmart, we absolutely provide academic programs and opportunities for white collar workers, but we focus heavily on the front line. We have a mission to unlock opportunity for America's workforce through education. And that is what, if you want to talk about mission aligned organizations, we are 800 employees who are highly focused day in and day out on helping create talent and economic mobility for America's workers. So you can imagine the passion that is in our voice and in our work every day as we continue to work with employers. Now, here's the exciting part to me. I come from business. I have worked in some of the largest companies across the nation over the past 15 years. In fact, have done some work in the Houston area with ExxonMobil and others over the years. And so when I think about this, I certainly think about the opportunity for talent and economic mobility for employees. But at the same time, one of the heavy approaches for how Guild goes about its job is there are others who provide education benefits for people on the market. What we really focus on is how do we actually create lift on business problems. And let's just say that the business problem is nothing more than upskilling because you have a tight talent pipeline, right? If there's nothing more than that, let's just at least use education benefits to help you reskill and upskill your existing employees to service that audience. But we tend to take it a bit further. From us, we're going to talk about what M&A activity that you have going on. We're going to think about what are the new business lines that you're going to open? Where are you expanding? What are the regions? We're doing economic studies, much like what you guys provide to your members, to look at where the talent is going to be tight over the next 3 to 5 years, and make sure that we're working with our employer partners to put programs together to both retain and help develop employees in those spaces where they need it. So if you think about it, for any of you guys who might work in the HR space, we talk a lot about the employee life cycle, the 6 steps in the employee life cycle. If I think about how Guild focuses, there are probably 4 of those 6 steps where we really start to show up. The place where education as a benefit has historically lived is in this whole idea of attracting and recruiting talent, and then retaining and engaging talent. And there are a couple of numbers that are pretty compelling for me as I started to learn more about Guild after I joined. For one of our employer partners, they found a 15% bump in their talent attraction strategy once they were speaking publicly about the programs they had with Guild. They actually saw more applicants come in the pipeline when those applicants saw the opportunity to get access to education. When we talk about retention and engagement and developing and reskilling, we've seen some of our employers with a 39% higher promotion rate for those who are in the program than not. The 1-year retention rate for those in our program is somewhere around 93% in the organization. It is pretty compelling data when you start to think about at every point during the employee life cycle, using education as a way to both find great talent, engage great talent in the mission of your organization, develop them, and then potentially at moments of transition, actually finding ways to reskill those folks, either as they leave or within the confines of the organization into new roles. Ultimately, you see Walmart listed there at the bottom of the screen. With Walmart, their $1 a day program, that's what they have in partnership with us. From an external press standpoint, 1.3 billion positive media impressions on day 1 of launching that program for them. And many of you may have actually seen those advertisements on TV, the commercials, the digital ads around that program. It's had significant lift for their employees. So it's a pretty impactful program. It's a great investment from the employer's perspective, and then the impact that it's actually having on employees is pretty significant. Now, I'm going to talk just for one thing, because this is probably where you'll hear me really go into my passion, and that is, I think education as a benefit is not something new. It's been around for a while. Unfortunately, the way that most programs are set up, they are unintentionally discriminatory, if we call it what it is. Because ultimately, the challenge with having programs like this is that it looks at your employees and it says, hey, if you have money to put down yourself, we'll pay you back at the end of the semester, which for those of us on the line may be a little bit more accessible. If we're talking about frontline employees, ultimately what we have done to those employees is said, but not you, right? We know your lifestyle, your finances. It doesn't really matter to us. What we're going to focus on is getting MBAs for the folks who are already in our higher level programs, but doesn't really take into account the frontline. When we think about our frontline employees and the folks that we're servicing, Guild, the ratio of frontline employees that are female, 65%. Our audience looks like 56. Non-white, 41 across frontline workers. Our audience is 54%. Those with some college experience but no degree, you see the numbers there, and then the population living below the poverty line. This is an audience we understand, and we design our services, our coaching, our support to deliver on this group and help them actually move into a better long-term financial stability and help the organization as a whole. So those are just a couple of the things that I'll mention about us and what we do. And in particular, I'll just say to give you my perspective and what I do in the organization, it's my job to help employers, to sit down with employers like those that you named that I've worked with in the past, and to think about the ways that these education programs can be aligned and marketed and financed in order to help make sure that the talent pipeline really delivers on the goals of the organization.
And one of your companies I know is Chipotle, and I heard an interview of the HR head of HR there, and she did a wonderful job explaining the economics of how it worked for them, which is, you know, those frontline workers in the line that are putting together our tacos and burritos and quesadillas and all those other things. You know, done fresh every day. So getting them skilled to be able to perform that is critically important. And she was like, if I get to hold on to them for an additional 6 months beyond when they may have left me, it is a huge return on investment in terms of why they were providing education. Is that one of the ways the employers are thinking about this?
Absolutely. Just the retention alone is enough to keep them in the door. Like if we weren't reskilling them so they can actually deliver on strategic initiatives in the organization, the financial cost benefit turns out that even if all we're doing is retaining them for another 6 to 12 months, which is, we see that 12-month retention rate. I think standard 12-month retention rate of frontline workers is about 56%. If they're using an education benefit, I think it's right around 93% for us. So yeah, that's exactly the way that Chipotle framed it. That's how we started the engagement. The impacts that have gone far beyond that. But yeah, you've got it.
No, and some of the impacts you're talking about, obviously, are the economic mobility of that frontline workforce. What are some of the outcomes that you're seeing there?
Yeah, I'll jump to that because I think these are just really compelling numbers. So at Discover Finance, they're one of our customers. For those that are using the benefit, they see a 41% wage increase. At Walmart, in addition to the higher retention that we've talked about, program participants are 2 times as likely to receive a promotion in the organization. So I think those are pretty compelling stats. But here's where I would go. I would go, the economic mobility is only a function in the community of the talent mobility within the organization, right? So as we talk with employer partners, what we're really focused on is how do we increase talent mobility in your organization, whether that is creating uplift, a vertical movement, where we're just helping you develop supervisors and managers, or if it's a reskilling effort where we're kind of looking at something more like a horizontal movement in the organization, how do we then create opportunity in both of those? I think that's pretty compelling impact for those individuals. One of the highlights of my week every week is that our stories team literally sends the stories around for the employees that we're having impacts on. I have had the opportunity to interview some of these folks myself, and the way that their lives change, the way that they light up as they think about the opportunities that this gives them are unbelievable. And ultimately, I'm a capitalist as a human being, and so I think what is most fascinating is that long term, even beyond the organization where they sit and the value that they add, these are people who come in with new ideas and innovation. It's part of their coursework, right? And they're coming in and they're bringing those benefits into the workplace. And many of them have dreams of launching their own business someday. So it's this flywheel effect of how it begins to impact an economy long term. That's pretty darn exciting to get up and be a part of every day.
And so many of in the last forum series, we highlighted the work of some of our community-based organizations that are having those same kind of conversations, but to your point, not at the kind of scale that you can have. And so I think you're providing some insights about how to engage and partner with employers, even if you're kind of a small community-based organization that is trying to figure out and partner with an employer that creates that pipeline, that it isn't just the first job, but it's the jobs that come after that, or to become the career.
Yeah.
Now, one of the stats you brought up had to do with some college and no degree. And our commissioner for higher education here in Texas is really concerned and focused on trying to address that population of some college and no degree. And so obviously you get to see kind of trends in terms of where folks are creating skills path. What are some of those trends that you could share with us so that we could begin to anticipate how we might connect with employers, but also begin to work with our educational partners so that they can be thinking about those short-term credentials that align to those trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, in general, we do a lot of research. MZ is a data source that we use regularly. They do economic modeling. They're looking at certain economies and looking how it's going to go. And they have a data point they use that's an automation index, and it's one of the things that we pay really close attention into when we start to look at jobs and roles of the future. And because we want to see a low automation index, if we're putting people in these paths, especially as we work with employer partners, sometimes you have short-term and immediate needs, and we want to look at those things, but we want to figure out long-term if we're giving employees skills that have long-term transference into other areas. So we spend a lot of time and energy on this. If we just go to like one of the most common pinch points in every organization, when I was in-house at Capital One, I reported into the CLO. It was one of the challenges we had there. It's been the challenge across a number of my customers, and it's just people management. That skill of people management. Frontline supervisors is one of the greatest pinch points across all roles. And so we have actually seen, we have both some certificate programs. We do have some like bachelors of business administration that are really popular, but we have just some basic programs around people and business leadership that absolutely, it is surprising how many people go through that. And so we see a lot of organizations who are actually looking for more support there. I looked at the numbers, over 1 million postings in this particular category in the past year across the nation. I think there is a 5% projected growth over the next 5 years. And so it feels like it's not just an immediate pinch point, it's going to be a pinch point pretty steadily, because that same demand is happening across, we look at 20 different industry verticals. And when we look across all of them, we see those same kind of trends. I'm certain if we looked at Houston, we would see some of those same things. The second thing, in addition to people management, data analysis is just critical. And I can't think of a job for those of us who might be in the HR or learning talent development function, even strategic planning. All of us have an obligation actually to use more data. I've been in my field for 15 years. The expectation for me to do a pivot chart is a lot higher today than it was 15 years ago. And so the pivot tables are overwhelming me. And I think every job is like that. No matter where you're seeing in the organization, there's an expectation that you know how to gather and analyze data. And so what we're seeing is both the role of data analyst, but more important, that those data analytics chops, no matter where you are in the organization, not just to be able to cut and slice and dice that data, but to craft a story with that data is super important. Even if you're working with machines, like there's an expectation that you gather the data from the machine and tell some story with that data for others. The third one that I'll point out is one of those super durable skills. We don't even talk, I had a piece out in Chief Learning Officer magazine last week where I talked about this exact thing, that we can't frame skills as hard and soft. They're durable or perishable. We're giving people skills that last in the long term, or we're giving them skills that last in the short term. And for many of us, we have to give both, right? Because tools, technology, processes, they're constantly changing. We have an obligation to deliver skills that are perishable, but that's a constant churn. We have to make some kind of investment in those semi-durable or durable skills that are going to last longer. One of those just super durable skills that none of us can be surprised about, because every one of us has expectations around, is just customer service, customer management, customer relationship building. When we look across every single industry, we see that start to pop to the top of the list as far as skills that people need. And so we really focus, again, going back on what are the programs, who are the partners that are going to help deliver the kinds of skills that are going to be transferable across roles, and make sure they give people what they need for the future. And ultimately, it has to be this mix between, yes, I will teach you how to use the processes, the tools that are fresh and that are being used right now, but I've got to pair that on the other side with super durable skills that are transferable across roles. So those are three: people management, data analysis, customer service, and management that are recurring for us.
I would also suspect that project management shows up on that as well, in the sense that people, you got to manage people, but you also have to manage projects in effective ways.
Yeah, I go back. So I'm going to nerd out for just a second for those of us who, again, spend a lot of time.
Before you do that, Matthew, I want to remind folks they can submit questions, because we're going to take a little bit of time to. There are no questions right now, but I wanted to remind folks that if they put some questions in there, we'll answer them as we go along. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna
nerd out on us.
No worries. This is where I'm gonna nerd out for a second. So project management, right now, project management does pop. I think the numbers are 5 to 6% growth in that skill over the next 5 to 6 years. So I think that's going to be fairly steady. I think one disruption that may not be accounted for in the economist projection is the way that Agile is impacting that world. In particular, the role of project manager is starting to dissipate, and the expectation is that on the resources that perform the work, they're using Agile methodologies and technologies to track their own work. And so while the projections do show the growth and increase there, and I think a general business management, project management certificate never did anyone any harm. I led a PMO for a couple of years at a large organization, and I think everybody can do something with those skills. I also am interested to watch how the prevalence of Agile and how it expands outside of the IT sphere makes a difference in how that role changes. Does it, instead of a standard project manager, does it look something more like a Scrum master, like a Scrum coach that's servicing multiple projects instead of owning it? They're almost serving as a consultant to teams to help them organize. But I do think we see project management. It's pretty compelling. The data is there. I'm interested in how much that data may shift as kind of this external force and change in process comes in and might modify the way people prioritize that role in the future.
So why don't we continue with some of the slides you have?
Yeah, I think ultimately what is most exciting to me about the way that we do business is that we're heavily focused on coaches. I think when you start talking about adult working learners, there is a lot of pressure. I graduated with a bachelor's degree. There have been many times over the years that I thought, I want to go back and get a master's degree. I really want to exploit that. And every time that I've done that, I thought, my God, I have a lot on my plate. Do I really want to take that on right now? There's a lot going on. It's been many years since I've been in school. Am I ready for this? And what we found at Guild, the model that we came from, our founder was a member of the Obama White House, worked tremendously on community in partnership with community colleges, and actually Guild started coming out of her work in community-based organizations where they coached community college students to success. So the model for us, what essentially at the end of the day, what we are paid to do is to help students finish their coursework through coaching. So we focus that coaching in really four different areas. Number one, employees are just overwhelmed about what to enroll in. If I invited most of you on the line right now to come pick out a new program in the catalog that you might want to take, you would find that it is paralyzing. Choices can be paralyzing. What's the benefit of this? How do I do it? And so we go through a lot of support about, well, what kind of roles can this lead you to? In your area, are there roles like this? What kind of income is on the other side of that kind of role? How do I just get the application in? I don't know about you, but I still, many years later, have some horror stories about the FAFSA form. So like helping them get through just the process of submitting applications into school. And because we find that there's a tremendous, if we think of it as a funnel, that's the moment where it all starts to fall apart for students. So getting them into enrolled. The secondly is those success coaches. And those are the folks who are all throughout the life cycle, especially for adult working learners. They're addressing time management. They're helping them navigate the support services that are available to them. They're watching for our partner schools. Our coaches actually have some access to some of the data around attendance, progress through the course, grades that they have. And so our coaches can pick up the phone and say, hey, looks like, hey, things are starting to fall apart. What's going on? What else is going on in your world? How can I help in those things? And encourage those students. So that second movement of coaches. Now you see at the bottom of the screen, we do have technical help, right? That we're providing all along the way. Again, we put a lot of work into creating experiences. And I think this can't be underestimated no matter what your role is in your organization, right? Forget Guild, pull Guild out of the equation. When Peter was introducing me at the beginning, he talked about my work in user-centered design, user design processes. And when I was at Capital One, we were going through a major transformation around designing experiences around the employee, acknowledging that many companies, when it comes to education benefits or many of the other benefits that are available, we put those out there for the benefit of our employees, but ultimately adoption rates are abysmal in many of these areas. And the reason is because it's a really crappy experience. Like if we call it what it is hard to use. None of us ever get up in the morning and think to ourselves, God, I can't wait to go on my HRIS. My HCM system is so much fun. Let's go into that learning management system and search for some learning and consume it. That sounds like it'll be easy, right? None of us think of our systems in those terms. And that, while it seems petty and small, ultimately those kind of items are causing the downfall of whether or not people take advantage of our services. So actually putting some time and energy into researching what people need and building that around them is the key to success, whether you're designing an HCM, human capital management platform in your organization, or for us, we're working in education benefits. The final one that I'll mention here, as we have partners that are focused on internal talent mobility, what we've started doing is actually coaching around transitions. Especially, there are some organizations that work with us as they are outplacing. That's where this started to build out for us. They said, as people are exiting the organization, we no longer need this role. Can you help these people reskill in a new program as they leave the organization? And so we started to build out the talent on our side, the coaching skills to help people navigate all the potential career pathways that they could be on, to start doing job searching and resume preparation, interview practice. So we actually, this isn't something that we turn on for everybody and do for everybody, because many organizations are really looking to keep the talent where they are. But in those places where a company says to us, hey, we're looking for a partner that can even just help our employees find new roles in the organization and help them prepare in our own organization for internal mobility, we provide the kind of coaching support that people need for that as well. So we really think of, ultimately, let me just say, again, I'll bottom line it in the way that I do, is if you're providing education assistance to your students, to your employees, but ultimately you're not doing the wraparound services like coaching to support them, ultimately they will fall out of that thing. And they drop out at alarmingly high rates. I want to go back to this data point because I think it's actually important. 74%, that's us, 71% of all frontline workers have some college experience. Like, if we just reflect on that for a second, it's a travesty, because those 71%, almost all of them have student debt. They have student debt and no credential. I'll give you the number. I was doing an analysis. There's a prospective client. They came to us. They brought us their existing tuition reimbursement program. And they said, will you guys look at this? We're trying to think about policies for the future and figure out what it is. What do you think of this? And here was the conclusion that we came to when we got to the end of it. For every $1 of education benefit that they were providing to their employees picked up $5 of debt. Their graduation rate, less than 10%. Full transparency for me, that makes me angry. Because ultimately, as folks who are trying to build out a talent pipeline, the opposite of what we want to do is to take frontline workers who don't have access to money anyway, heap debt on their head while we feel better about ourselves for giving an education benefit, which then doesn't lead to a credential. And ultimately, they find their way out of our organization. We don't keep them as long as we wanted. They don't leave with as many skills as they could have. They do leave with debt that we accidentally put on them for reasons we didn't intend. I think that kind of
it's the trifecta of bad outcomes for an individual.
Yeah. All in the name of, we thought we were doing, because nobody on our side as an employer, none of us were thinking we're doing a bad thing, right? We thought we were really doing a great thing to service those employees to do something that benefits them. And ultimately, what we gave them was not a gift at all. So yeah, bad outcomes. That was, Peter, it was a very eloquent way of
Well, I didn't want
something.
to, I can say that you probably are a little more compromised than I am. Yeah, but I think, as we get into this, that spectrum of coaching is critically important. And we can come back to this conversation, but it's this, with our community-based organizations, they're there for the long run, like you, which is trying to find out where the pieces where I'm potentially going to have, need additional support. So I think this spectrum that you're providing is very helpful for us as we think about what needs to be in place, and particularly in light of, the disruption that's occurred because of the pandemic and because of automation technologies. This is going to be even more critical going forward, which is how do we ensure folks have the support to get to the completion on a meaningful credential?
Yeah, when I take these people, here's what I did in May. I set up a series. For those of you who might be familiar with design thinking, there's a part of that process that's called empathy interviews, where you sit down with folks and you really listen. And so I set down a number of folks, actually a handful of folks who are in the Houston region as well, Houston and Dallas both. And I sat down with them. They had recently been laid off from retailers. And I sat down with them and I talked about what websites they were using, who they were talking to. And in the course of, I'm going to say with roughly half of them, in the course of a 40-minute phone call, we finished the interview. And at the end of it, I said, okay, here are the 3 things I want you to do with each one of these people. With 2 of the folks that were a part of the interview, one said, thank you for that phone call. I'm re-enrolled in college. I know where I'm going. Another one said it was about a different type of issue, a health issue. They had made a doctor's appointment to address the issue. The kind of support that people need right now is really different. It's variable by the person that you're talking to. And so sometimes it is hyper focused on education and just navigating the foolishness that has become the administrative burden around training, development, education. Again, all unintentional. It's the way that we try and scale these things, but ultimately it's really hard on the student, or what's happening in their personal life, or what's happening in their work life. Ultimately, this is how we reduce attrition. And for us, the result is compelling. It's an 80% retention rate on a 12-month role there, where they stay in the programs as a result of the kind of coaching that they get. So yeah, so absolutely compelling.
So we have a question that, before we go to the next slide, is really related to this slide. And it is, do you see any employees who don't take advantage of education benefits or encouragement because they are discouraged by a fellow employee or supervisor? For example, it won't make a difference to you or a family member. It didn't help me. Kind of almost to the point you were getting at, which is, I'm now more in debt than I was, and it didn't really do me any benefit.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, it's one of the things that we do. I think we work really hard to build programs that get the top down. When it comes to the CEO at Disney, they know our name. When it comes to the CEO of Chipotle, they know our name. When it comes to the CEO of Walmart, he knows Guild, because we worked really hard to get sponsorship at the top of the organization that would help overcome the objections that folks may hear elsewhere in the organization. So does that lack of sponsorship from a direct manager have an impact? You bet it does. You absolutely bet it does. And you have to work at overcoming that, both through the way that you market and communicate with those folks, as well as the level of executive sponsorship that you create around it. And then ultimately, the question becomes, do I take the supervisor directly out of the chain of making the decision and encouraging and discouraging access to education? Because ultimately, if those folks aren't advocates for doing the right thing for employees, for continuing to develop themselves, ultimately that's going to be a big barrier to adoption of those programs. So the answer is yes, we see that, and we have to work really thoughtfully about how we communicate at all levels of the organization, including to those managers, to get as much encouragement and adoption in the pipeline as we possibly can. But it's absolutely a real issue.
I'll let you continue. I keep interrupting your presentation.
That's what this is supposed to be. Let's talk about whatever we need for this conversation. Okay, so specifically for this group, what I want to talk about, we have a diagram we use where we start to think about how does upskilling play out? Why am I upskilling? Ignore a guild for just a second. Obviously, I'm a big fan of guild, otherwise it wouldn't be there. But for you in your organization, if I go back to my time at Capital One, I was responsible for the education, the learning tied to the digital transformation, right? So we've hired 47,000 people to come work at this bank. We've got 72,000 total across 12 countries. And we've told everybody, hey, we know we told you that you were hired to work at a bank, but just kidding, we're now a technology company. And so if you're a teller, you need to know what Agile is. If you're in a call center, you need to know design thinking. If you're in some random non-tech role, you should have some idea of what an API is and how it may work. That's overwhelming to say the least. And so we have started to break down how we think about upskilling. I talked a little bit about vertical and horizontal movement. We think of it in these three ways. First, upskilling to improve performance. And so this is, hey, we're going to keep talent mostly in the same role, but we need to deepen their expertise. We need to create pathways, not big pathways into whole different job roles. We just need them to have a chance at promotion. So what kind of programs, learning opportunities can we give them that give them advancement opportunities? I'm going to go to the far right. We have this upskill to manage role transformation. So at Capital One, in my organization, we hired a bunch of business analysts, and we came back to those business analysts and we said, hey guys, we've made a decision, we've changed our mind. We're transferring your skill set to a product management skill set. You all should serve as product managers, think like product managers more than you think like business analysts. So your job used to be to crunch numbers. Now what we're going to tell you is you should still crunch the numbers because that's what product managers do. But now you should actually talk with users to make sure that the product that you thought would work out financially is what they want. And then finally, you should be really good at communicating with engineers because we're a tech company now. And so you should know how to articulate stories and requirements to engineers in a way that they can go build your product. That's an overwhelming move. That's in the white collar space. We had to go through something similar where we were still doing a bunch of paper processing in home loans. And we came to that group and we said, okay, home loans processing, we've automated this. You know, from a business perspective, that looks good on the books that you found a way to automate the role of 300 people. If you're the human on the other side of that automation, it doesn't feel so great. And so what we came back to those folks and said is, look, we have a big gap. We have a demand in our organization for QA engineers, for people who can test code and make sure that the experience is working. So what we're going to do is reskill you all from home loans paper processing to a QA role in the organization. It was a minimal certification and training that we could do, but it would give them a new set of skills. And ultimately, let's be honest, a QA engineer has a much longer term path than if we did differently. So you're doing that role transformation. And then I think that middle bucket there, you're seeing a lot of focus on internal mobility. So on one hand, you're reskilling to fill a talent gap where you have a hard to hire role in the organization. And so the way that we talk about this is a concept of gateway opportunities. How do we take frontline employees and move them into something? It's not a high skill, super professional job. We reframe that as a gateway role where we are constantly thinking about how do we give you skills, enough skills to let you move to a really solid middle skill set, something we can do with maybe certification and or training, and it gives you skills that are transferable with a living wage, something that you can sustain your household with. And so if we can do that, then we start to move, it's a daisy chain, right? Where we start to move people from these low skill, highly automated roles into something like a gateway middle skill role. And that gateway, what has been fantastic for us is we've started to map pathways from, you know what, if you you step out here for 2 years and you do this role, it's a good thing, but we can also then plug you into this longer term path. And we started looking at, for every 4 or 5 of our frontline roles, what are maybe 5 to 7 gateway roles? And then ultimately, what are the 7 to 10 high skill, high demand areas that we have in an organization? And then what are each of the milestones between those that we can help you get through? So that hard to hire role where your talents, you're competing, if you're in if you're in Houston, look, you are not just competing. If you're a bank, you need information security folks. But guess what? If you're at ExxonMobil, you need information security folks. And if you're at NASA, you need information security folks. And if you're down the road at any organization in the region, especially your healthcare, I heard HCA is based here in Nashville. HCA, a medical record is worth roughly 5 times what a financial record is on the black market. So we've got to have ways for reskilling, and the competition in Houston for those information security roles is going to drive the labor cost through the roof, right? We had at Capital One, we had what we felt like it was really good tap on the market in Northern Virginia, and then Amazon comes along and announces they're launching HQ2, and all of a sudden our cost on talent acquisition and talent retention went through the roof. And then it became a question of, all right, how are we going to take fresh college hires who didn't even major in IT, and we're going to reskill them into a role that's high demand? So I think we think about all of these different roles, and we start to map to what is the talent that's in demand in your organization and what's in decline. I know there are a lot of organizations, and I'm sure if we unpacked on this, Peter, there are lots of folks who are thinking super skills focused. How do we just get you the individual skills that you need? And I think ultimately that is where we are going to be. I am so proud to be a part of the Open Skills Network and the work that we're doing with a number at WGU. I heard them come up, a number of organizations to really focus on skills. But in the meantime, people are still hiring roles. So how do we look at the roles where people are and make sure that we're moving talent that direction to meet the needs, especially where there's a lot of pressure in the local community?
There's an interesting question here. You know, obviously you work with, Fortune, publicly traded companies that can afford this. Can you help us also think about, and here's the question, the conversation sounds something like, like something at a larger corporation. How do small business owners get more involved, either with Guild or just, thinking about this differently? Are there state or federal sources of funding? I know and assume that folks coming out of the system can have education tax credits that pay for training and retraining in your programs. I mean, so just help us think about kind of the impact for smaller employers that are going to try to, I'm not sure we can manage a relationship with Guild.
Yeah, full transparency. My area of focus, my entire career has been Fortune 200s. So this is not my deepest area of expertise. But what I have watched when smaller employers come to us and want to talk about what are mechanisms they can use, for the purpose of scale, it's not always a great fit with Guild. And so what we tend to do is to focus on local partnerships. For smaller organizations, it is less likely that you have a geographically dispersed population. Many of the folks we're working with have highly geographically dispersed. And so the learning partners that we have need to provide predominantly online learning in order to satisfy the entire scale of what those organizations have. If you're in one community and you're a smaller organization, pick up the phone and call your local universities, call your local community colleges. Start to work with education providers who are down the street with you. They are willing, many of them are willing to strike up partnerships where they can think about discounted tuition programs. And I think there are folks like you all that probably have much deeper expertise, Peter, into the local tax structures, incentives that are available to help move education in this way.
And I'm going to add a little bit to that, just to add the nuance of the Houston piece. One is, our community colleges are probably an underappreciated resource when you look at their non-credit side in terms of how they work differently with employers. To your point, here's the credential that can get you into this kind of job or occupation. And so that would be one place to start. And then small employers, if they can actually work together, can probably partner with a community college and then access from the Texas Workforce Commission, the Skills Development Fund, to actually help, support, folks going through those programs. So that's one way to think about it in terms of, here in Houston, and part of what we at UpSkill Houston are trying to do is work with, groups of employers to help them solve their common talent shortages and skills gaps. And so that's, one area. And I also know that, as I referenced before, the Commissioner for Higher Education is looking at what are the shorter term credentials that can help, that frontline worker with some college, no degree, get that next credential to start kind of, what you have in front of us, which problem are we trying to solve? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to add that in general, universities, community colleges are businesses just like you, searching for, I don't know if you've looked at the numbers. Higher education partners are not sitting in a particularly pretty place for the next couple of years. There is an expectation by, I think it's 2025, 2026. We're talking about what was supposed to be a 15% drop off of enrollment that begins at that point in time. Past that, if we look at enrollment this year, I mean, almost everybody on this line right now, I can guarantee, is trying to not just fill a talent pipeline. You're looking for a more diverse talent pipeline. You're looking for a talent pipeline that represents the diversity of the community you serve, because ultimately, those are the folks who have the purchasing power to make the decisions with your brand. Here's the thing, the Black student enrollment and Latinx student enrollment right now, as a result of the pandemic, is off. I think it's 8% from what it was before. Just in general, the freshman class overall is off something like 7% in community colleges. Like, that talent pipeline that we're already feeling constricted on is going to get even tighter. I promise you, and I know this because I've gotten the RFPs from Texas higher education institutions who are looking to build out programs to satisfy the economic needs of their local community, and they want to know how to do it. Those education partners are absolutely looking to build programs that are aligned with business needs to service you all in the community. And I think that is a powerful, powerful thing, Peter. I love hearing the idea of how do we bring multiple employers together, especially smaller employers, to make sure that there is a voice in the community. Your higher education partners locally want to succeed when they are staring down the barrel of decreasing enrollment and the financial impacts of that. So go leverage that voice that you have locally with organizations like UpSkill Works to make progress there.
And maybe I'll put in one other plug in terms of the trends that are going on is the Texas Association of Community Colleges. I'm not sure how many community colleges are in the state, but it's probably, well over 100, almost 200, are looking at a program. Initially in the summer, it was called 300 by 300, which is how do we get 300,000 folks in 300 days with some sort of relevant short-term credential, which is now being reframed to be Texas reskilling and upskilling by education. And so that program will be rolling out, and that should be an opportunity. And we're coming up on time. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And so, I want to come back a little bit to the coaching thing, partly because there's a question, what are the employment trends for the coaching profession? But I want to frame up kind of, we think, as we've looked at our new strategy, as we think about what it's going to take to scale, kind of the impact that's going to be here, that effective career coaching and guidance is going to be essential, whether it's in the school district, whether it's in the community college, or whether it's in, a community-based organization that has to support that adult learner getting through something. And so, do you see any tools that are helpful in assisting individuals in selecting those programs, going back to kind of this, initial piece to this, but also, we've kind of hinted at it, and then this will probably be the last question. How do we also shift folks mindsets to be lifelong learners and have that growth mindset that they've got to be thinking differently. And I know I threw a lot at you, so we've got about 4 minutes. So you've got about 2 minutes, Matthew.
Let's solve some of the biggest problems that we have. We got 2 minutes. Let's go. I'm in. Really, look, how do you create lifelong learners? We talk about Kill and Dweck's growth mindset, the idea that we have to grow. Ultimately, I've lived in an organization that need to make this shift. I've worked with a number of employers that have. There is a language change that has to happen. And I think it's less from fear and more from inspiration that has to say to folks, look, there's opportunity here. Things are changing around us. And when a CEO stands at the front of the room and talks about what they're learning, not about what you should learn, but about what he or she is learning, it sets a tone in an organization. When the conversation becomes, who's your mentor and who are you mentoring in the organization, it changes a dynamic. When you start to open content, here's one of the things that we're classically known for in organizations and in learning and talent development. We close pathways to people, especially non-exempt populations, so that we're not paying for people to upskill into areas that don't pertain to their job. And so ultimately, if we want to create this culture of learning, we want to have people who are believe that long-term they have to grow. Number one, we have to be realistic with the data. What's happening with automation, what's happening with roles. We've got to be more transparent than ever about what we see on the horizon. But then number two, we've got to move that from fear to inspiration. We've got to talk about the opportunities in front of us. We've got to talk about the ability right now on a very personal level. I have a 33-year-old brother. He's a plumber. His body is broken at 33 from crawling underneath houses. And he called me and he said, Bubba, because that's what he calls me. I'm from Arkansas. Bubba, I can't do it anymore. Can you help me? And so we sat down and I said, okay, I want you to go look at Career Karma. I want you to have a coach. This is who the person is that's going to talk with you through it. And he said, I'm in. I bought him a laptop and I set up internet at his house. Everybody doesn't have access to that. But I believe on a personal level that that's the kind of investment that's going to have to happen. Now, some of that's going to be federal, some of that's going to be local, some of that is us as employers looking at the people on our teams and saying, I believe in you. We believe that here you should learn, and it is more profitable to us as an organization to keep you by offering these benefits to you. I think for each one of us, we have to work intentionally. We can't just look at the individuals and say, you go learn. We have to say, we are a place where it's safe to learn, where it's safe to fail, to dust yourself off, to pick a new career, to go a new place. We are watching for you because it serves us and the market to be aware of what the needs are. So I think there are a whole lot, there's a whole book, a couple books on this idea, but ultimately I think our place as employers is to create a space where they can learn, where they know it's okay and safe, and we enable that.
So I'm going to have to close it out because I want to be respectful of folks' time. You talked about the digital divide, or you just hinted at it.
Yeah.
Has Guild seen any solutions that we should be thinking about as we think about closing the digital divide in Texas? And you can punt if you want.
I am going to punt on this one because it's just as hard as it can be.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think employers have some part, but this is where we need our community leaders really to step up and work on an entire system that works differently, especially when it comes to internet access than what it does today.
Yeah. So Matthew, the final comment I have in our Q&A is you have a lot of fans. You have been infectious. And so they've asked me can we have Matthew back for another session? So we may be having another conversation and potentially bring you back after the first of the year because we're getting up on that holiday season. And so you've added so much for us to think about. So I can't thank you enough for taking the time today to share that. And I know there are a bunch of places we could go deeper in. I know you had some great stories that we were going to try to tell, but you're just infectious and sharing great information. So I want to say thank you again. As our audience will see on their screens, we have listed information about Guild Education. You obviously have put it there. And we want to thank our audience for participating in our UpSkill Works Forum series. We also want to, once again, thank our gold and silver underwriters In the next coming weeks, we have several topics that we'll be bringing to you. On December 2nd, we'll be highlighting some work out of Opportunity America, focused on kind of the indispensable institutions, these community colleges that we were referencing. We'll have Tamar Jacoby. And then following that, we'll have kind of a career exploration, kind of innovations that are happening in Texas around career exploration the week after that. We'll share additional information as we go forward in the emails that we come out. The recording and the slides will be posted and shared with folks. So thank you again, our audience, for participating. Enjoy the balance of your week, and be safe and take care of yourselves. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.